Good evening. How's everyone doing? This is Ben. Thank you for joining me for Ben's Bible study. Tonight we are reading through 2 Corinthians chapter 10. I hope that everyone's having a great week. It's Tuesday. Yesterday some of us had the day off, so that was nice. We've gotten loads of snow here in Chama, USA. I shoveled about a foot today, and I'll probably it sounds like they're telling us there's going to be about 18 inches by tomorrow. So a lot more shoveling to do tomorrow. Thankfully, I have neighbors who help out with that. One has a plow and the other one has a front end loader, and so that helps immensely. But yeah, so the week is going pretty well. It's always pretty to see all the snow, of course. Snow is amazing. It's one of the reasons I chose to live here. They said that we got loads of snow, and I'm not disappointed. Turns out we actually get loads of snow here, so that's pretty exciting. So most of the time I read New Living Translation, but I was reading through it, and there are little things here and there that don't really line up with what all of the other translations say. Certain things, it seems to be a weird context, and then there are notes that say what the other translations say, but without getting into the notes, I think it's just easier to read, from a different version. So I'm going to be reading from the New International Version. I have the English Standard open also, and so if we need to, then we'll pull that up and take a look. Bible.com is what I'm using. It's awesome because I can use multiple translations, just pull them both up and then look at them and compare them and contrast them. And anyway, super handy. Anyway, without further ado, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 1. By the humility and gentleness of Christ, I appeal to you. I, Paul, who am timid when face to face with you, but bold toward you when away, I beg that when I come, I may not have to be as bold as I expect to be towards some people who think that we live by the standards of this world, or that we live according to the flesh. Verse 3, for though we live in this world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. So this is talking about, I mentioned this yesterday, that 2 Corinthians chapter 10 talks about the way that we fight, the manner in which we engage in spiritual warfare. And so we live in the world, but we don't wage war with swords and shields. I mean, I guess if you use the reference from Ephesians, shield of faith and sword of the Spirit, but we're not fighting against other people here. We're not waging war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not those weapons. The weapons we fight with have divine power. So the weapons of the world are physical, right? And we've talked about this in other chapters also. The difference between our physical body, our present body, and our spiritual body. And so the weapons that we fight with are not the weapons of the world. They're not physical. They have divine power, rather. They're spiritual weapons that have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And so, this is something that we have to do, on a daily basis. And part of this is, it's sort of a double entendre. So they're talking about, or Paul is talking about his position as a teacher. And so he's saying that as a teacher, he doesn't wage war as the world does. He demolishes arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought. And that was one of the things about New Living. It says that we take captive all of their thoughts. But I think that it's, and all the other translations agree that it's not just other people's thoughts that we're taking captive. It's all our thoughts, including our own. And I think that's extremely important, that we take captive our own thoughts, because I think it's in Jeremiah. The heart of man is wicked. The heart of man is deceitful and very wicked. Who can know it? And so, if you follow your heart only, if you follow what's in your mind only, you will be led astray, because the flesh is sinful. And so you'll have random thoughts that come into your head that don't necessarily, that are not obedient to Christ. And so you have to take those thoughts captive and make your thoughts obey Christ. Verse 6, and we will be ready to punish every act of disobedience once your obedience is complete. And so this is saying, well, I think it's pretty straightforward, actually. We'll be ready to punish every act of disobedience in your church once your obedience as a church is complete. Once the church is on the right track, then there will still be outliers, and we will address those as needed. Verse 7, you are judging by appearances. It reminds me of what God said to Samuel, right? When he went to anoint one of Jesse's sons. And, he went through the first however many. I think it was maybe 5. I think there were 6, but there might have been 8. It was either 6 or 8, I think. Anyway, whatever, it doesn't matter. But, he went through the first set, everyone who was in the house, and it was none of them. And God told Samuel that man looks on the outward appearance, but God judges the heart. And so when Paul says here, you, talking to the Corinthians, you are judging by appearances. If anyone is confident that they belong to Christ, they should consider again that we belong to Christ just as much as they do. So even if I boast somewhat freely about the authority the Lord gave us for building you up rather than tearing you down, I will not be ashamed of it. And so he's saying that the Lord gave him authority as an apostle over the churches. So he has authority, but he is not using that authority to tear them down. He's using that authority to build them up, to make them stronger, to share the word of Christ and to edify, and so to build them up. And so he's not ashamed of it because he's using his authority to build them up. Verse 9, I don't want to seem to be trying to frighten you with my letters, for some say, and this sort of calls back to the beginning, right? Because it says, I, Paul, who am timid when face to face with you, but bold toward you in a way. So this is something that they say, and so we're getting into that. Verse 10, for some say his letters are weighty and forceful, but in person he is unimpressive, and his speaking amounts to nothing. Such people should realize that what we are in our letters when we are absent, we will be in our actions when we are present. Verse 12, we do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they are not wise. And so I think that in here, he's talking about, others who are comparing among themselves and saying that they're, all these things, commending themselves, writing their own letter of recommendation, if you will. But he's saying when they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they are not wise. And we should take that to heart as well. We should not be comparing ourselves, with ourselves, right? You shouldn't be looking at, the guy down the pew from you or the guy across the street. I'm not comparing. Anyway, I'm not going to pursue the argument because, frankly, I can't think. But we shouldn't be measuring ourselves against each other. We should be measuring ourselves against Christ. Christ is our standard, not someone else. And comparing ourselves with other people is not wise. Verse 13, we, however, will not boast beyond proper limits, but will confine our boasting to the sphere of service God himself has assigned to us, a sphere that also includes you. We are not going too far in our boasting, as would be the case if we had not come to you, for we did get as far as you with the gospel of Christ. And so he's saying, we can boast about the fact, that, our boasting is confined to our sphere of service. And our sphere of service includes you because we did go to you in person. We were there. We preached the good news to you, and we created a church. We planted a church there. And so when we boast about you, we're not going beyond our sphere of service, because we were actually there. If we are boasting, we're boasting about, things that we actually did. Verse 14, we are not going too far in our boasting, as would be the case if we had not come to you. For we did get as far as you with the gospel of Christ. Neither do we go beyond our limits by boasting of work done by others. So we're not boasting about something that someone else did. Our hope is that as your faith continues to grow, our sphere of activity among you will greatly expand. We're praying that you are going, talking to the Corinthians, that you are going to also go beyond, that you will be witnesses. Just as we were witnesses to you, that you will then be witnesses also. And so our sphere of influence will expand. Or sphere of activity is what this says. Verse 16, so that we can preach the gospel in the regions beyond you. And so neither do we go beyond our limits by boasting of work done by others. Our hope is that as your faith continues to grow, our sphere of activity among you will greatly expand, so that we can preach the gospel in the regions beyond you. For we do not want to boast about work already done in someone else's territory. We don't want to be boasting about something that someone else did. He says already that we're not doing that, and we don't want to do that. We want to, it's the same idea with missionaries, right? They want to go where the word of God has not been preached. Where they're not having to build on someone else's foundation, but they can make sure that what they are building is built on the foundation of Jesus Christ only. Now, that's not saying that, that one missionary in a certain geographical location is all that should be there, but, when you have another missionary who goes to that area, hopefully they are expanding the area and going to additional people, going to not just the established church there, but going outside that church and reaching more people. Verse 16, so that we can preach the gospel in the regions beyond you, for we do not want to boast about work already done in someone else's territory. But let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends. And so it's not about going out there, and what is it? Proverbs says, let another man praise you and not your own lips. And so, generally, it's, we look at people who brag about themselves as, it's generally not a good trait to have. It's not something that, it's not desirable in someone. As someone who is constantly talking about how great they are. And so we're not looking, and God doesn't see it that way either. God resists the proud, and he gives grace to the humble. And, Jesus talked about those who are poor in spirit, for they will inherit the earth. Those who are poor in spirit and those who are meek. He said that they're blessed, right? And so it's not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends. And so it's the one who gets the recommendation from God, the letter of recommendation written by the Lord. That's what we want. That's the desire for all of us, is to be the one whom the Lord commends. that's the chapter. Thank you for joining me for Ben's Bible study. If you have any questions, put it in the comments. I'll be back tomorrow with 2 Corinthians chapter 11. I hope everyone has a wonderful night, and stay warm, stay safe out there, and I'll see you tomorrow.